Let's watch a CNN panel discussing some of the conservative election fraud lies that are already beginning to circulate and these narratives they're creating that signal pretty clearly that if the election doesn't go their way, again, they're just going to cry fraud. Probably with less evidence than they had last time, which was zero. Surprise, surprise. Something I'm sure also magically won't exist to them anymore if they win the election. It was the most free and most fair election of all time. But let's line these clips up and see what context we can provide.
When you have a system that has been stacked with Trump-appointed judges in certain states where they have gone above and beyond what has been existing case law about voting rights and access to the ballot, there is cause for concern, especially when you combine that with this constant grievance message. And this is what I mean by that. Trump plays on people's grievance, their grievance about broken systems, about them falling behind. And his answer is not Black, brown, immigrant people, whatever. The second answer is the system is broken. So do not trust elections. Do not trust anything around you. He has made it so whatever works for him politically, he has an audience mobilized and ready to go to question even the most mundane, ongoing government system.
Exactly. And the extent to which Trump is willing to damage the integrity and the credibility of our institutions rather than admit that he lost is incredulous in and of itself. But even more so when you realize how truly mundane or insignificant the things he's talking about really are and how detached from reality they are, right? For example, the big conservative stir over mail-in voting, where they pretend it was this new thing just created for COVID and it's the most corrupt thing of all time, even though the military has voted by mail since the Civil War. And because they typically vote Republican, they don't ever have a problem with it. They never bring this up. And no widespread fraud has ever been found in this method. California has done so by mail since 1978. This is for any voter that wants to do so. They don't need an excuse or any reason. No widespread fraud has been found in California from this either. But when it becomes clear that nationally this is something that's heavily going to favor Democrats, now Republicans want to pretend that it's incredibly flawed in this corrupt system of voting, but still won't talk about the military voting by mail because, again, that favors them. Another example is the voter ID scare, where in-person fraud is less likely, and this is statistically true, less likely than you getting struck by lightning, standing up, and then getting struck by lightning again. Again, no exaggeration here. It's statistically more rare than that is, right? In-person voting fraud, the only kind of fraud that requiring a voter ID would address happens 0.00000000004% of the time. Less than 100 instances in over 1 billion votes, if you're wondering.
They're also getting a major assist from China. They're getting a major assist from Russia. They're getting them across social media, where we're seeing these images that are being perpetuated in battleground states specifically, where they're pointing to immigrants who aren't even, people who aren't even from those states. A lot of those are stock
photos. There was a video
of
Haitian,
exactly.
a fake video, just to be clear, of alleging that Haitian immigrants were voting multiple times. The video is completely fabricated.
But that is a Russian creation. That was done by the Russians.
And this is how it's going to play itself out
on
election day, separate from election night. Right? We have driven people away from being normal poll workers. People every 2 years go to the same precinct and have done it for years, if not decades. So we have new people in a lot of these places, new in counties and precincts.
And in some cases, not to interrupt you, but in some cases, what concerns me about the trend is that there's this idea that only the hyper-partisan should be involved in the elections, which is not really the way things work.
And I think a very important piece of this that should not be overlooked is how Russia interferes into our political sphere and how it's always on behalf of the right. Why would one of, if not the greatest adversary to America, want to carry water so hard for Republicans? That is a question that each American should ask themselves. From interfering in 2016 in ways that the Trump campaign accepted with open arms, from using shell companies to fund right-wing media into dispersing talking points on their behalf, to now doing more propaganda campaigns. This infiltration of conservative spaces by Russia has to be one of the most deeply concerning aspects of our current political sphere, especially when it's coupled with the facts like Trump saying sent Putin COVID stuff secretly while withholding it from Americans. In 2020, Trump's had secret conversations with Putin since leaving office, possibly undermining the current administration. It begs the question as to what's going on here and why are you being so hush-hush about it? And it also exposes a bit of MAGA hypocrisy. It exposes them as unserious hypocrites with how they both made up and then pretended it was this big deal that Biden's colluding with Ukraine or he's in China's pocket and receiving bribes from them. And then it comes out that Trump's gotten millions from foreign governments and Trump is actually doing this with Russia, and not a peep from MAGA. They actually don't care.
He intends to intimidate people involved in the process. He intends for people like Liz Cheney, for the press, to be intimidated and frightened.
And combine that with
for poll workers.
Okay.
Intimidation is key for Trump in how he tries to get his way. It's bully his way to it, or there's no other, he doesn't know how to negotiate, right? Putting aside the fact that just the other day, he said that Liz Cheney should have I think 9 rifle barrels pointed at her face and should be shot practically, which is insane in and of itself. But just look at how he lashes out at media, right? Threatening to sue them and have their licenses revoked or be arrested for being unfavorable to him. Now, the Washington Post and other similar publications and media companies have decided to withhold a Kamala endorsement for fear of what might happen if Trump were to win. This is fascism. Look at when Trump tells his voters, hey, be at the polls, stand back and stand by, make sure you're watching, be in the booths, as if it's their duty to watch everyone and make sure nothing goes awry. And with how we saw they handled this at the Capitol, I mean, if even a fraction of that happened at the voting booths, nobody there is going to be safe. He tries to bully and intimidate his way to the top. And while nothing is for sure, not at this point, especially in a deadlocked race with the built-in advantages that Republicans have, like the Electoral College, like gerrymandering, I definitely just hope that we can vote him and vote this ideology as far away from our political sphere as possible. And as far as him, directly into a jail cell where he belongs.